What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back, everyone. This is Lee, and yes, today's the day we'll be taking a look at the Canon R1 versus the Nikon Z6 III. So, with all that said, let's begin. So right before we get started, I just want to throw out some disclaimer. If you guys been following the channel, you guys know that I own Nikon, I own Canon. Canon for video, Nikon for photo, but for the Canon R1, this is not my unit. I rented the Canon R1 from lensrental.com. And also, I just want to point out that Lens Rentals, they did not sponsor this video at all. However, I do want to give a shout out to 3D Wonders and their collaboration with me on the iScan SPV2 scanner. Because of this, I was able to create my first ever AC unit for the R5 Mark II, because let's just face it, when you're recording on C-Log 2 on the R5 Mark II, you're just going to overheat. So with that said, if you're in the market and you want to build your first accessory and you're looking for your first professional scanner, definitely check out 3D Wonders. And if you're looking to upgrade your current 3D scanner, definitely check out 3D Wonders. They got a whole variety of levels of scanners on their website. So I'll leave all the information down below. And of course, last but not least, I need to bring this up. No camera brands has reached out to me to do this video, and all tests you see in this video has been done live on my Instagram. You guys were able to access my raw files. You guys were able to see my live autofocus testing. You guys get to see all my settings. All you guys that have been following me, thank you guys so much. And for everyone else that are just tuning in, I mean, I brought up R5 Mark II autofocus issue on day one. I don't think any of the fanboys from the Canon group is going to apologize to me. I don't think they are. Nikon Z6 III, a bunch of features issues. We'll get into that later on in this video, and I don't think Nikon Z6 III owners out there are going to give me an apology letter as well. So with that said, let's take a look at the pricing between the Canon R1 and the Nikon Z6 III. Now the Nikon Z6 III costs roughly around $2,500 upon release, but currently right now after a year, it's roughly around $2,200. And as for the R1, I believe it was $6,500 when it was first released, but now it costs $6,800. So throughout this entire video, you guys need to decide if that extra $4,600 is well worth it on the Canon R1 over the Nikon Z6 III. So let's quickly take a look at the specs. Now for the Nikon Z6 III, this is a 24 megapixel partial stack CMOS sensor that features the XP7 image processor that came out roughly around June of 2024. And as for the Canon R1, this is also a 24 megapixel full frame stack sensor BSI CMOS sensor that features the DGX accelerator and the DGX-X processing that came out roughly around November of 2024. And as for the video features, I will say that the Canon R1 do offer more video features over the Nikon Z6 III. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you know what I'm going to say right here. I'm going to keep saying this until Nikon does something about it, and I heard it might be coming soon, but that's just a rumor. But anyways, if you take a look at the hot shoe, you'll notice that the Nikon does not have a multi-function hot shoe like the Sony cameras, the Lumix cameras, and also the Canon cameras, and also the sensor shield. Yes, Nikon do not have any of this on their system, but the Canons do. The R1 has it, the R6 Mark II has it. I can definitely go down the lineup on their older models because they all have it. Yeah, it's just, I don't understand why Nikon don't offer it. It's kind of weird. Canon, I'm gonna push you guys to the side for a second because this seems to be a Nikon problem for the whole time. Canon already have this feature. Nikon, you don't have this feature. Pre-capture RAW. You have JPEGs, and the look on people's faces when they're like promoting the pre-captured JPEGs just make me giggle a little bit. But yes, you guys don't have pre-capture RAW like the Canons and the other brand. But anyways, I digress. Let's take a look around both camera systems. Now, as we take a look at the back of the camera, you'll notice that the EVF on the Nikon Z6 III is 5,760,000 dot, but the Canon R1 is 9,440,000 dot OLED screen for both on the EVF. However, interesting enough, The articulated screen on the back is both 3.2 inch and they both sports 2,100,000 dot. And speaking about screens, let's take a quick test reading on the monitor screens. As you can see, the Nikon is 810 lux, whereas the Canon is 485 lux. Now here is the side of the camera. The Nikon Z6 III features a USB-C, a full HDMI, a microphone and stereo jack, also an accessory terminal for your remote control receiver. Now, for the Canon R1, it features a USB-C, a Ethernet, HDMI, microphone, stereo as well, and a PC terminal. Now let's quickly take a look at the button layouts for both cameras. I'm not going to bore you guys with going through every single buttons between each cameras, but you guys could definitely see it for yourself right over here. I mean, you get more buttons on a flagship camera over a mid-range camera, obviously. Also, don't forget that the Canon, you could go vertical mode if you want, so you get all the buttons on the other end of the camera. Nikon, you could buy a battery grip to get something similar if you want as well. And here is the front, and yes, that is an N3 output on the R1. Pretty cool, old school. Now, let's take a look at the battery situation. The Nikon features the ENEL15C, which is roughly around 60 USD, whereas the Canon features a LP-E19, which is a 170 USD. And let's just put it this way, definitely the Canon will give you close to almost double the shooting experience over the Nikon if you look at the CIPA ratings. Now for the storage situation, the Nikon features one CF Express card and one UHS 2 card, whereas the Canon features two CF Express cards. And speaking about cards, let's take a look at the buffering. Now once again, for my test, I use the same exact card. This time I'm using my fastest card that I have right now, the next storage card. Also, I'm using the exact same lens, the exact same settings. We're doing mechanical and electronics, so let's take a look at the mechanical. Here is the Canon. Here is the Nikon. And here is the audio levels, and I want to point out something right here. The Canon mechanical shutter slap, it's slightly lower than the Nikon. Nikon is slightly louder than the Canon, so that is something that I noticed when I ran the test. Also, when it comes to mechanical shutter, the Nikon is programmed up to 200 shots, it seems. So that is something for you guys to definitely take note of. The Canon, you could just keep shooting and shooting and shooting. So yeah, for those people that are shooting more mechanical shutter out there, definitely the Canon will give you more shots. Whereas the Nikon, it does give you 14 frames per second, but you do stop at 200 frames. Now let's take a look at the electronic shutter. Here is the Canon at 40 frames per second. Here is the Canon at 20 frames per second. Now, when it comes to buffering for 40 frames per second, it does buffer roughly around the 27-second mark, whereas the 20 frames per second, it roughly buffers around the 15-second mark. So just keep that in mind. Now, for the Nikon, here is Nikon at 2000. And here is the Nikon at 8000. And as you guys can clearly see, there is no buffering in the Nikon Z6 III at all, which means that the Canon R1, even though they do offer 40 frames per second, but when you lower it down to 20 frames, thinking you'll get a much better buffering experience, you're getting a worse buffering experience over a Nikon Z6 III, which is kind of disappointing. But I just want to note that even the pre-production, folks told me that it also had buffering issues. So hopefully Canon has some sort of firmware update that can fix this, or this is what it's supposed to be. So that is kind of a big bummer, unless the file information on the Canon is greater than a Nikon. So we'll definitely take a look at the image quality for that. And speaking about image quality, here is the first test. This is the ISO test in mechanical shutter. And by the way, I'm using the exact same lens from the buffering test, the Canon 24mm EF lens. And also I turn off every single settings in the Canon and the Nikon. And here is electronic shutter. And in my honest opinion, perfect lighting. They both look more or less the same when it comes to ISO noise, but definitely leave your comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. And as for the next test, here is the dynamic range overexposed test. This is where I overexposed my shot by close to 4 stops and I pull back down the exposure. And in my honest opinion, by the way, this is mechanical shutter, I would say that the Canon might have a slighter edge over the Nikon Z6 III, but definitely leave your comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. Here is electronic shutter, and I would say again, I think that the Canon has a slighter upper edge over the Nikon when it comes to overexposed shots, just by a hair, just by a little bit. But definitely leave your comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. And as for the next test, this is the dynamic range underexposed test. This is where I underexposed my shot close to 4 stops with the exact same lens, the exact same settings. This is a mechanical shutter. And as you can see, we all knew this, the Nikon retains more dynamic range over the Canon. Here is electronic shutter. And I will say the story remains the same. The Nikon will have more dynamic range shadow over the Canon when it comes to underexposed shots. But definitely leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Now as for the next test, this is the autofocus test. I'm using the 50mm and also the 28mm from both brands. Here is video autofocus in good lighting. And as you can see, in a good lighting situation, the Nikon Z6 III is capable of tracking me all around in the scene, even though there's a mannequin in the middle of the scene. However, the Canon R1, we have issues. We have a lot of issues with your autofocus system. It can be easily distracted. Basic autofocus, all camera works just fine. You could do portrait photography, all works just fine for both systems. It works flawlessly. When it comes to other people in the scene, when you have other elements in the scene, such as a mannequin, your system, your Canon R1 is easily distracted. That is not good, Canon. Now let's take a look at the low light performance. And here is the autofocus. As you can see, the Nikon Z6 III seems to do just fine. The Canon R1, it has issues. It just seems to have some issues, Canon. You need to fix this in your next firmware update. Your autofocus is not great. It can be easily distracted in low light situations. Now, here is photo autofocus in good lighting. And the story remains the same. The Nikon does better than the Canon. The R6 Mark II don't have this problem. The R5C don't have this problem. The C80 don't have this problem. I can go down the list with all the full frame Canon cameras that I've tested in the past. They don't have this problem, but your R1 has this problem. So that is not good. You need to fix this. Here is low light. And the story remains the same. There's nothing I can really say different. Canon has autofocus issue. Basic autofocus works just fine on both systems, by the way. So you're doing portrait photography just fine. You have a single subject in the scene, nothing in the background. It will work just fine. But with distractions, it won't work fine. So that's something for you guys to definitely take note. Now let's change lens. Here is the 50mm. Here is good lighting and video autofocus. As you can see, in good lighting video autofocus, definitely the Nikon does better than the Canon. Since we're zoomed in, you would expect the Canon to do a little better, but the Canon doesn't know the difference between the subject and the mannequin. And this is servo autofocus, so it's supposed to be tracking the moving subject, which is me. It just doesn't do that. Here is low light autofocus video, and the story remains the same. The Nikon does not have any problems with me, but the Canon does. So Canon, I know you're watching this, please update your firmware update once again on your R1. Here is photo autofocus in good lighting, and the story remains the same. Now here is low light autofocus, and once again, no surprise here, the Canon doesn't do that well versus the Nikon. Canon, you have autofocus problems when it comes to distractions in the scene. Basic autofocus is just fine when there's no one else in the scene, but when it comes to really having a complicated scene with people in the background, you will have autofocus problems over a Nikon Z6 III. So just to wrap things up, the Nikon Z6 III versus the Canon R1, both cameras have their own pros and cons, so let's talk about it. Now with the Canon R1, this is a flagship model which comes with the flagship pricing at $6,800, and yes, it comes with the most, generic flagship features such as more buttons, bigger battery, vertical grip. However, this particular unit comes with 24 megapixels at 40 frames per second, right? Get more video features than Nikon C-Log 2 is so awesome. Way better dynamic range than the Nikon Z6 III. Also, the EVF OLED, it's probably the best on the market currently, one of the best. And of course, the mechanical slab, that is quite interesting. I mean, it was a lot softer than Nikon. Now, for the obvious features that Canon always provide for the consumers, I mean, it's crazy. Sensor shield, right? You get your pre-capture RAW. I mean, this is crazy. Nikon don't even have that yet. They just have pre-capture. We'll get into that. And also, Canon, you guys always ship your camera with excellent blur autofocus. So that is very cool of Canon to do so. Now, as for the cons of the Canon R1, which is kind of mind-boggling, but I can't believe it's still going on, so let's talk about it, right? Number one, the dynamic range. Your dynamic range did take a hit with this stack sensor, so just keep that in mind. Also, the autofocus. It's crazy. If you saw the live on my Instagram, you guys will be kind of numb right now because even the fanboys they don't know what to say. I even tried to log in my face in the camera and still, the mannequin is evil. The mannequin can trick the Canon, which means if you're focusing on a subject and the scene gets too complicated, there's a good chance your Canon R1 is going to slide to another participant, another user in the scene. So that's something that I noticed with the Canon. It is not good. This is pretty bad. However, if you know how to operate your camera, you know which mode to get out of, to switch to make it actually focus on your subject. However, when you're paying this much money and you're seeing a cheaper camera that can actually focus on the face better than your flagship model, it's kind of cringeworthy. Also, with that in mind, even the previous Canon models that I reviewed don't have this problem. It comes with the R5 Mark II and the R1. Those are the two that has this problem. Now, Z9 had this problem back in the days and I made fun of it, but now R1, you guys have this issue. Canon autofocus isn't that great when it comes to complex scenes. It is awesome if there's just one person in the scene. I mean, you got a white backdrop, go for it. Any camera can get that shot. And any simple scene, the Canon can definitely get that shot. So just make sure your scene is very simple. If not, the autofocus is going to bounce around. So that is something for you guys to definitely take note of. If you're a professional, you already know how to kind of, go around that issue. But if you are trying to upgrade from like an R3, just note that your R3 do not have this problem. It do not have this problem. Let me tell you guys that it don't have this problem. So with that said, this is a Canon issue right here. Canon needs to fix this in the next firmware update. It took Nikon 2 years to fix the Z9. So with the R1, if I could keep tricking the system with just a mannequin just standing there on server autofocus, that's not good. That's pretty basic right there. That's terrible. So that is something for you guys to definitely take note. Also, another issue about the R1 is the buffering. Now, the buffering is quite interesting. If you're just shooting pure RAW, you should be fine. But 75% of you guys shoot RAW and JPEG. So with that in mind, just to see Canon still struggle with this buffering issues, I don't know why, because the dynamic range is less than Nikon. However, the buffering should be better than the Nikon. It is not better than a Nikon. It just buffers with the JPEGs, so that is not good. Even your pre-production had this issue. So this is a firmware update, or maybe this is actually the feature. I mean, stack sensor, you shoot 40 frames per second, but what suffers? The dynamic range and also your buffering. That's probably what's going on maybe. So that's my guess, but who knows? No, as for the Nikon Z6 III, now this is not the pro consumer camera. This is mid-range. This is probably one of the best features right now. Is 1/3 of the price of the R1. There you go. 1/3 of the price of the R1. Also, you get a brighter monitor screen over the Canon R1. That is amazing. I did not know that till I did my reading. That means if you're doing astrophotography, a lot of landscape late at night, you have a better monitor than the R1. And also the buffering is excellent. You guys have better buffering than the Canon R1 as of today. And the autofocus, human autofocus, is very excellent. It cannot get tricked by the mannequin. The mannequin just stays in the middle. By the way, my test is so simple. It's what's the camera doing. And Nikon, you did not get tricked. Even in low lighting, you did not get tricked, video and photo. So that is pretty good. Also, your dynamic range is still on par. I mean, it's still on par with Nikon branding. I mean, you got one of the best dynamic range on the market, and it shows you got better dynamic range than the Canon R1. Now with all the pros, let's talk about the cons on Nikon Z6 III. Obviously, the first one will be the hot shoe. There is no multifunction hot shoe. The ZR has it, but that means that your Nikon Z6, I don't know, 4 will definitely have it, but the Z6 III do not have it. I don't understand why they don't have it right now. It doesn't make sense to me because when I started this channel, I was using one on my Lumix GH5. That's 2018, 2019. That's crazy that's taking them so long to do this. It doesn't make sense to me. Also, your sensor shield, that also doesn't make sense to me. All the Canon models that I've used so far for the past 3 or 4 years all have sensor shield. You don't have it. Your Z8 has it, Z9 has it. This doesn't have it. It just doesn't make sense to me. And all those people out there that are like trying to defend the situation, let's not defend the situation. Let's tell Nikon, we need this. I think that's something that I want to point out to all the fanboys. We need a sensor shield on our cameras. No matter what model it is, we need that, because once you change your lens, there's a probability a dust speck will get into your sensor. Also, pre-captured JPEGs. Nikon is probably one of the camera brands left that has pre-captured JPEGs. I don't understand why they don't have the RAW. Canon has that for the longest time. Even their cheaper models have that. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's just mind-boggling. I don't know why, but they just love to do JPEGs, and the look on people's faces when they're advertising it on their release, the campaign, it's kind of chuckling because they're like, yeah, JPEGs, it's awesome. We could do pre-captured JPEGs. I don't know why they're smiling. We're not smiling because you're charging a premium now and you're smiling in your campaigns for a pre-captured JPEG. It doesn't make sense. It just, it's just craziness, right? And crazy enough, on top of all of that, this system did not release with bird autofocus, and we had to wait for a year plus to get bird autofocus in the system. And also, I just want to point this out. This is the last con on the Nikon. Definitely the marketing for the Z6 III was very lackluster, I don't understand it. I just didn't understand what was going on. I don't know who ran that campaign, who actually greenlighted that campaign, because when I look at that campaign, I saw folks that do not use Nikon. They use the competition. They were in that campaign for their own benefit. And once the campaign was done, they don't even use the Nikon system. That's what Nikon did. And it's pretty bad. And there's a few of them in the campaign. You guys gotta look through it like I did. And it's pretty crappy, because that means Nikon can't source out their own Nikon users out there. I mean, heck, I use Nikon, but they didn't reach out to me, but they reach out to someone else that don't use Nikon. That is not good. That is pretty cringeworthy. That's actually why I didn't buy the Z6 III on the day of. It was just like, what is this? Pre-captured JPEGs? No blur autofocus yet. You got someone else from the other brand using your camera, and then once the campaign is done, they're back to their old camera. I don't know why they're doing that, so I didn't pick it up. I bought it like a year later, so that's what I did. But yeah, that's Nikon right there. Poor campaign, poor marketing, great system, great autofocus, great dynamic range. Marketing, You guys need to work on that. It's just terrible. I mean, at least try to find people that use your system. It's just bonkers, right? I mean, I'm looking at it right now. A lot of you guys saw on my Instagram live. A lot of you guys were shocked too. Like, oh well, Nikon said that's great. We're just using for one segment and call it good. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. Leave your thoughts down below. Let me know what you guys think. But all in all, thank you guys for checking me back, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely click like and subscribe, and I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, take it easy. Peace.